So here's another statement which we're asking your opinion about. So traditional design principles cannot fully meet the modern needs of architecture. Do you agree or do you disagree with that?
Earlier in my presentation, which you did not hear, I mentioned that there is perhaps one of the greenest structures there is actually the Bahay Kubo, the lowly
Yeah.
Bahay Kubo. And I'm not, of course, it has all the elements. It is sensitive to the site. It uses very little energy and water. It uses materials that are in locality, environment
Let
friendly,
me put this.
and it has good indoor environmental quality. So it has all the elements of green architecture. But we definitely cannot build that in our context because, of course, we have already indoor plumbing, we already have indoor electricity. So hindi na siya uh, applicable in our setting. But there is definitely a lot we can learn from vernacular wisdom. Ang dami natin pwedeng matutunan na maa-apply natin in modern architecture. And some of a lot of architects are already doing that, have done that already. The likes of architect Bobby Manyosa has done that. Talagang in-incorporate niya itong mga elements of the Bahay Kubo in a modern structure. So, maybe hindi fully mamimit, pero pwedeng-pwede. And there is a lot that we can learn from that.
Now, traditional architecture and modern architecture, medyo ano to no? If you try to compare the two, medyo magkaiba sila with regards to principle. Now, if we analyze the nature's process, okay, in nature, all organisms, they evolve. Humans, nag-evolve pa rin tayo. Of course, we cannot see it in one day. It happens for generations. No, you cannot see the changes. Pero definitely, nagbabago tayo. Pero one of the difference na makikita mo, for example, human biology. If you go to Asia, makikita mo may similarity in our character. Brown color, dark eyes. Now, if you go to Africa, no, they have different color. Their color of their skin is black. In other countries, in Western countries, their color is white. It has something to do with environmental context. That dictates what their biology should look like. Although we have the same DNA, pero very minuscule differences will make changes. Of course, this is biology. But what I'm trying to say is that in comparison to architecture, there should be an evolution that should happen from traditional to modern. Ang ang issue lang kasi na nakikita ko is because nowadays we design a building, we consider it as innovation, but it is not connected with our traditional roots. Now, if we really want to make an innovation, there should be a transition from traditional going towards modern. Okay? Not literally na kailangan kung ano yung itsura ng building noon, ganun pa rin yung itsura ng building ngayon. Definitely, iba yung climate noon, iba rin yung climate ngayon. Ito yung binabanggit ko na kailangan, meron tayong evolution. But the evolution should be guided by a process. Hindi yung we start with what we know, like we know right now the technology that we have and use it in order to design new architecture form. Okay. Now, if we really want to move forward, I think we have to connect our design principle from traditional architecture, and then we use that. We integrate the strategies that are workable today, and then of course, nagbabago yung climate, we need to change. Okay, and therefore, kung ano man yung changes na dapat nating i-integrate because of what's happening right now, we have pandemic, we have climate change, global warming. We use that as our baseline for innovation, for evolution. And I think if we have this principle where we connect the past to the present, definitely we will have a more sustainable future. If nature is
Yeah.
doing it, evolution-wise, dahan-dahan, hindi pwedeng, okay, stop the evolution. Ito na agad yung itsura. Hindi ganun eh. Pero madalas tayo ganun yung idea natin when we do design. Okay, I will not respect tradition. I will design new form. So there's no evolution in that. So I think there should be an element of connectivity from the past to the present. If we do that, we have a direction in the future.
Yes, exactly. I think it's really important to know the history of the place because great architecture is always contextual. It's true to its history. Okay, from Sir Rex, can we hear from you?
Very briefly, I defer to colleagues on that question. Generally, I just referred to it towards the end of my presentation in relation to the fact that evolution, representing change for that matter, is something that dictates how we essentially develop the kind of infrastructure that we want. No? But principles, in a sense, are supposed to be consistent throughout the time in terms of, let's say, for example, in relation to climate change, what is key there would be our adaptation to the environment. No? So it's not necessarily just creating a structure in a vacuum, but what the environment dictates. For example, how hot or how cold the environment is will also define or dictate what kind of structure that you develop or create. So your principles, of course, will define how you will proceed with that, including how you will evolve through time. No? We are finding out, for example, that a lot of changes as a consequence of climate change, and I'm aware that we will still have discussions on that later on, is already challenging the principles that we're using, is challenging the paradigms that we're actually using. So it might be worth assessing every so often what we're using. And even what is traditional and what is modern is also redefined depending on the circumstances again.
We are discussing the technology over indigenous or ecological wisdom. I would like to, I think you as future designers and architects, you know where the level of compromise should be, no? Or will be. I would like to present a scenario of a green and sustainable model right now. Look at BGC, which is considered, we have a lot of LEED certified buildings in BGC, Makati, or any prime metropolis of in the Philippines, no. But when you compare the kind of construction materials that was used there, the concrete in itself comprises 80% of the structure. How many, how much mountain or extraction did we do in order for us to create a green or sustainable building, right? So in comparison to this, are we really sustainable? Are we really doing it sustainably? No, either way, the technology that we are talking about is the same technology that brought us to the threshold of Anthropocene. No, um, these people, so-called experts and specialists, are the ones doing the extraction, right? They are the ones who knows how to extract these kinds of materials. They are the ones who knows how to convert it into construction materials, right? So if we are talking about technology that will harm the environment, that is bad, diba? If we are talking about developing technology for the rest of the living organisms, not only humans, then we will not be on this situation right now, right? If we will continue to develop the most sophisticated technology, which I believe is limited, no? As I gave the example earlier, um, all of the technologies that was focused on Yolanda, still we had more than 6,000 deaths, right? While in Batanes, we never even heard about it. Wala tayong nakitang technology na nakafocus doon. Wala ring anything that focuses there. Just pure indigenous and ecological wisdom. Mas maliit pa yung ginastos doon in terms of redevelopment or pagbigay ng mga donations sa kanila, no ha? So what I'm trying to say here is that we know when to use the right technology. We all know. We all know. We don't need to. Really be confused, no? If it will ruin the environment, if it will ruin the other living organisms, we will be we will suffer too because we are all interconnected. It's as simple as that. Pag ginawa mong masama, pag tinapakan mo yung langgam, makakasama yan for humans. Akala natin hindi, ano ha? But it will really affect us. Now, anong kinalaman nito sa architecture? Anong kinalaman nito sa pinag-uusapan natin or sa profession natin about architecture? This only shows that I laid down the foundation of the concept of regenerative systems thinking. How are we going to create an architecture that will respect other living organisms? No? For example, I will avoid or try to reduce consumption of my concrete usage on all of my design. Okay, that means a big relief on the extraction. What if all of us, the construction industry, which is the biggest stressor on the built environment, no? What if all of us have the same thinking? No? Instead of concrete, we will use timber. But then the government disallow us to use timber because it's bad for the environment. But yet they allow extraction, they allow quarrying, they allow mining. No? While if we will use timber, trees regenerates. No? In about 8 to 10 years, we will have materials to harvest. No? The only thing is that we are not planting trees, but it regenerates. No? So this is a very good comparison in with respect to extraction of materials. No? If, as I mentioned earlier, actually this was I discussed this on my ebook, no, which is entitled "Connected." We cannot solve our situation right now if we will have the same thinking that we are using before. No? We need to rethink and redo the way we create our architecture. For example, our curriculum, our education. In fact, no, we have so many subjects like history of architecture, architectural design, but we don't have botany, we don't have biology, no, which is very much important in terms of creating life on architecture, right? So these are so-called compartmentalized education, where in fact um, the community of species have they are interconnected, but yet our architecture is compartmentalized, and so we do not understand, we do not have any idea of other relationship, no, to other profession. No? So that is the situation right now. That's the reason why we are focusing on being a specialist. We are focusing on being an expert, but we don't have the so-called generalist, no, who understands the interconnection of these communities. Yeah, back to you, Jonathan.